The battlefield in the 41st millennium is not a place of glory, nor even of survival. It is a graveyard that stretches as far as the eye can see, a theater of smoke, blood, and fire, where men and women are ground into silence by weapons too vast for their comprehension. And amidst this endless slaughter, where entire regiments vanish in a single barrage, there walk figures who should inspire comfort but instead bring dread. They are the medics of the Imperium, men and machines tasked not with saving lives, but with extracting whatever value remains in a dying soldier before the dirt takes them. They move through the trenches like specters, their white robes stained brown with old blood, their hands clutching rusted tools, their eyes dulled by the weight of a duty that has long since lost any resemblance to mercy. To imagine a battlefield medic in the Imperium is to misunderstand the very nature of war. In the worlds of ancient history, before the Imperium spanned the stars, a medic was seen as a healer, a figure of compassion who braved gunfire to save the fallen. In the grim reality of the 41st millennium, such ideals are fantasies, crushed under the weight of a galaxy that knows no peace. The Imperium does not value individuals. It values quotas, victories, and survival. And so the medic has become not a healer, but a judge, jury, and executioner for those who cannot carry on the Emperor's will. A guardsman collapses in the mud, his leg shredded by shrapnel, his chest burning with lasfire. He cries out for aid, and a medic appears, hunched beneath a ragged cloak, servo skull floating at his side. The wounded man prays for salvation, for pain to end, for a chance to return home one day. But the medic does not kneel to comfort him. Instead, he studies the wound with cold detachment, his mind already calculating whether the soldier is worth the effort. If the injury can be patched with a stim injector or a crude bandage, the soldier is shoved back to his feet and ordered to return to the line. If not, the medic reaches for another tool, not to save but to silence. A bolt round to the skull, a blade slipped between the ribs. The prayers end in a spray of blood, and the medic moves on to the next broken body. This is the truth of medicine in the Imperium. To be wounded is not a guarantee of help. It is a gamble with death, where the one sent to save you may be the one who decides your life is a waste of rations and ammunition. The Emperor demands victory, not comfort, and so the wounded are nothing more than variables to be measured, weighed, and discarded if they cannot continue the fight. Those who are deemed worthy of treatment face horrors of their own. Battlefield surgery is not an act of precision, but of brutality. Under fire, with shells exploding above and blood pooling in the trenches, medics hack off limbs with crude saws, cauterize arteries with heated knives, and inject cocktails of stimulants that burn through veins like acid. There is no anesthesia, no comfort, only pain endured in the name of survival. Soldiers scream and thrash as augmetic limbs are bolted into stumps, as their skin is peeled back to stitch organs that have already begun to fail. The lucky ones pass out. The unlucky remain conscious through it all, their minds scarred as much as their flesh. Even when the wounded survive, their fates are cruel. Some are fitted with augmetics so crude that they can no longer function as men, only as shells built for one last duty. Others are carted off to the rear lines, only to vanish into the labyrinthine halls of Mechanicus facilities. There, the line between healing and harvesting disappears entirely. A man whose wounds make him unfit for war may be declared fit for service of another kind. His brain scooped clean, his memories erased, his body fused with steel until he returns not as himself, but as a servitor, a silent drone doomed to labor without end. For many soldiers, death on the battlefield is mercy compared to this second life. Yet the medics do not question. They cannot. Questioning would mean admitting the horror of what they do, and in the Imperium, doubt is as fatal as any wound. So they walk among the fallen, their faces blank, their tools soaked in gore, their souls long since buried beneath duty. They chant the Emperor's name, not as comfort but as justification, a litany to drown out the truth of their work. If the Emperor demands sacrifice, then let the soldier be sacrificed. If the Emperor demands survival, then let the soldier live. The medic is no healer. He is an enforcer of necessity. To watch them at work is to understand the scale of the Imperium's cruelty. 1,000 men may fall in the mud, their screams rising like a choir of the damned, and the medics will pass among them like carrion birds, plucking what little value remains. They do not save the man who dreams of home. They do not save the boy who still clutches his family's locket. They save only those who can still serve, and silence those who cannot. And all of it is done in the Emperor's name, as though divinity can sanctify horror, The soldiers know this. They whisper about it in the trenches, their voices low, their eyes glancing over shoulders. They know that to be wounded is to be judged, and many beg their comrades to end their lives quickly, rather than fall into the hands of the medics. Better a clean death in battle than a slow mutilation under blood-stained hands. Some regiments even make pacts, promising one another that if they are ever too badly wounded, they will not call for aid but for a bullet. These whispers are never spoken where officers can hear, but they linger in every campfire and every trench line. This is the grim reality of battlefield medics in Warhammer 40K. They are not healers, not saviors, not figures of mercy. They are another weapon of the Imperium, used to keep its soldiers fighting and its wars endless. Their victims are not only the wounded, but hope itself, cut away with every limb, silenced with every final injection. In the 41st millennium there is no kindness. There is only duty, and in the hands of the medics, duty is as sharp as any blade. The Imperium of man is built on blood, and like any great edifice of suffering, it requires caretakers to keep it standing. The medics of the Imperial Guard, known formally as the medici, are not born of compassion, but of necessity, forged in a system where life is cheap and survival is all that matters. To understand the grim role they play, one must look back to the origins of the medici corps and the philosophy that shaped them into what they are. The Imperium does not treat medicine as a science in the way ancient civilizations once did. It does not nurture discovery, nor permit curiosity, nor prize innovation. In the dark millennium of the 41st century, knowledge is chained, guarded by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and every scrap of medical practice is wrapped in ritual. Where once a doctor might have studied the human body to understand and heal, now a medici chants prayers to the emperor as he saws through bone, reciting holy liturgies to sanctify the act of stitching flesh. What was once science is now dogma. What was once healing is now service. The medici corps was formed not to preserve life, but to preserve manpower. From the very beginning of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor's armies swept across the galaxy, it was clear that the Imperium's wars would consume lives at a scale beyond imagining. Entire populations would be raised into regiments, hurled into battle against Xenos horrors, heretic armies, and the ever-lurking threat of chaos. Without some way to patch the wounded and return them to the front lines, those vast regiments would collapse too quickly, and so the medics were trained, not as healers, but as recyclers of flesh, tasked with salvaging whatever parts of a man could still be used. They were not alone in this mission. The Adeptus Mechanicus supplied them with crude augmetics, stim injectors, and pain suppressants. The ecclesiarchy cloaked their work in sermons, declaring that every stitch, every cauterized wound, every sawed-off limb was a holy act. And the officers of the Astra Militarum enforced the truth with iron. A soldier does not belong to himself. He belongs to the Emperor. His body, his blood, his very life are not his own. They are tools of the Imperium, and when those tools break, they must be repaired quickly or discarded entirely. This is the ethos that defines the medics. The irony is that the word medic suggests salvation. To a soldier of the Guard, the sight of the medici moving through the trenches is not always relief but dread, for they know what their arrival truly means: judgment. A wound that might have been survivable in another age, in another culture, is now a death sentence if it slows the regiment's advance. The medics are not healers, they are evaluators. They calculate how much flesh can still be useful, how much effort is worth expending, how much blood can still be spilled in the Emperor's service. Anything less than optimal is erased. The history of the medici corps is littered with stories of cold efficiency. On the ash wastes of Armageddon, entire regiments were ordered to march through chemical storms that melted their lungs. The medics walked among them, stabbing stim injectors into those who could still hold a laser gun and leaving the rest to choke on their own fluids. On Cadia, when the fortress world still stood, countless soldiers were patched together with crude augmetics, their arms replaced with steel claws, their eyes with cracked lenses. Not because the Imperium wanted to save them, but because every body was a weapon and no weapon could be wasted. The medics themselves are not spared from this philosophy. They are trained from the beginning to bury all traces of empathy. Compassion is weakness, and weakness is death. Many are broken down in their training, forced to cut into living flesh while chanting prayers, beaten until they can perform amputations without flinching, drilled until the sight of blood no longer stirs even the faintest hesitation. By the time they reach the battlefield, They are no longer healers, but functionaries of survival. They obey orders, not conscience. They serve the Emperor, not humanity. And yet there are cracks in the facade. Some medics whisper in the darkness about what they have seen, about the screams that haunt them, the faces of men they silenced, the memories of eyes that looked upon them not with relief, but with terror. They confess to one another in hushed tones that sometimes, just sometimes, they feel like butchers rather than saviors. But such whispers are dangerous, for to question is to risk being reported, and to be reported is to vanish. Many who have broken under the weight of their duty have found themselves strapped to the very tables they once presided over, lobotomized, and returned as servitors to continue their work in silence. In the Imperium, even the healers are expendable. The origins of the Medicae Corps reveal a bitter truth. They were never created to heal in the way mortals understand healing. They were created as another cog in the war machine, another instrument of utility, another method of extracting value from the endless tide of human lives that fuels the Imperium. Their role is not to preserve dignity, but to deny it. Their role is not to bring peace, but to prolong suffering just enough to squeeze one more moment of service from the dying. And so, as the guns roar and the trenches fill with blood, the medics move among the fallen. They are relics of a broken philosophy, servants of a system that has long since traded humanity for survival. To the wounded soldier, their presence is not a promise of safety, but a question whispered through clenched teeth. Are you still useful, or are you already dead? The answer decides everything, and in the Imperium, mercy is never part of the equation. The battlefield is chaos, mud, smoke, and fire mixing into a nightmare where men scream and die in their thousands. In that chaos, the medics of the Imperium work, and their tools are as terrible as the wounds they treat. There is no sleek technology, no clean operating theaters, no sterile instruments. Instead, there are rusted saws, jagged clamps, and augmetic grafts hammered into place with all the finesse of a blacksmith. Medicine in the Imperium is not a science of healing, but a craft of brutality, and every tool reflects this truth. A soldier with a shattered arm is dragged into the shadow of a trench wall. The medic does not offer painkillers, for such luxuries are rare and precious. He grips the limb, mutters a prayer to the Emperor, and begins to saw. The blade grinds through bone. The soldier screams lost in the roar of artillery. There is no gentleness, no precision, only speed. The stump is pressed against a heated iron, the smell of burning flesh filling the air as the wound is cauterized. If the soldier does not pass out, he is injected with stim to keep him moving. Within minutes, he is shoved back to his feet, ordered to carry his lasgun with his remaining hand. The Imperium has no time for recovery. Only duty-crewed augmetics are the most common answer to catastrophic wounds. Where ancient civilizations might have crafted seamless replacements, the Mechanicus provides the guard with cheap, mass-produced prosthetics. A leg of clanking pistons, a hand of rusted claws, an eye replaced with a cracked lens that glows faintly red. These augmetics are not designed for comfort or even long-term survival, but to push the wounded back into the fight as quickly as possible. Many fail within days, but that is acceptable. The soldier's life expectancy was never measured in years, only in battles. Stim injectors are another tool, and perhaps the cruelest. These cocktails of combat drugs flood the body with adrenaline, numbing pain and forcing the wounded to fight on long after their bodies should have collapsed. A soldier with half his chest burned away can still hold a firing line for an hour before his organs finally fail. The medics administer these injections without hesitation, knowing full well they are not cures but temporary delays of death. To the guard it is enough. If the soldier can fire a few more shots, if he can hold the trench for a few more minutes, his sacrifice has value. The most horrific of all are the surgical servitors that accompany some medici. These cybernetic monstrosities carry drills, syringes, and scalpels in place of arms, their dead eyes staring blankly as they cut into screaming men. They have no hesitation, no conscience, no mercy. They work with inhuman precision, grafting steel into flesh, cutting away organs, bolting on crude replacements. Many soldiers fear the servitors more than the enemy, for at least the enemy promises death, while the servitors promise survival without end. To fall beneath their knives is to know that death will be denied, that the body will be reshaped into something that may no longer be human at all. The battlefield itself is their operating room. Trenches stained with blood, ruined buildings lit by fire, muddy fields where corpses pile high. These are the theaters where medics perform their work. They kneel in the dirt, their tools spread on blood-soaked cloths, their hands shaking not from fear but exhaustion. There is no sterilization, no attempt to prevent infection. The Imperium does not care if the soldier dies tomorrow, so long as he can still fight today. Every wound is patched just enough to squeeze another hour of service from the body. Every life prolonged not for its own sake but for the Emperor's endless war. The tools of the medics are more than instruments. They are symbols of the Imperium's philosophy. Each saw, each injector, each crude augmetic is a declaration that humanity itself has no inherent value. Flesh is weak and weakness must be stripped away. Pain is irrelevant, dignity meaningless. The only measure of worth is usefulness, and once usefulness is gone, life is discarded like broken equipment. The tools are not meant to heal, but to enforce this reality. There are whispers among the guard about medics who take pride in their tools, who polish their saws and name their augmetics as though they were relics of the Emperor. To them, the act of cutting into flesh is holy, a ritual as sacred as any sermon. They believe that every stitch is an offering, every amputation a hymn. Such beliefs are not discouraged, for in the Imperium, faith is the only shield against despair. If a medic can convince himself that butchery is worship, then he will never falter, never hesitate, never question the horror of his duty. But not all medics are so blind. Some know the truth of what their tools represent. They see the fear in the eyes of the wounded, the way soldiers flinch when the saw is drawn, the whispered prayers for death rather than survival. They hear the cries of those they cannot save, the silence of those they are ordered to kill. And in the quiet hours, when the guns fall silent, they stare at their blood-stained tools and wonder if they are healers or executioners. The answer, of course, is both. In the Imperium, there is no distinction. The tools of the medics are extensions of a larger machine, one that grinds humanity into dust for the sake of survival. They are not weapons in the traditional sense, but they inflict as much terror as any lasgun or chainsword. To be wounded on the battlefield is to know that these tools await you, that your body will be cut, burned, and bolted together until you are deemed useful again. And if you are not useful, then the tools will end your life quickly, before moving on to the next broken body. This is the grim reality of battlefield medicine in Warhammer 40K. There is no healing, no kindness, no salvation. There are only saws and syringes, augmetics and servitors, pain and silence. The medics carry their tools not as instruments of mercy, but as proof of the Imperium's endless cruelty. And for the soldiers who fall into their hands, there is no hope, only the question of how much longer the Imperium will allow them to suffer before death finally comes. The Imperium does not heal out of kindness. It does not tend wounds to ease pain or mend broken bodies to restore lives. In the endless wars of the 41st millennium, healing is not mercy, it is punishment. To be patched together on the battlefield is not a gift, but a sentence. For the wounded soldier, survival means being forced back into the fire, made to endure suffering beyond comprehension in the name of duty. Every stitch, every injection, every crude augmetic graft is not a promise of life, but a reminder that the Imperium will never release its grip until the body can give no more. On the front lines, soldiers often whisper that death is preferable to treatment. The stories spread from trench to trench, tales of comrades who were dragged screaming to the medics, only to return days later, limping on metal legs, their flesh wrapped in infected bandages, their eyes hollow and lifeless. These broken men are not healed, only remade just enough to continue fighting. The pain does not stop. It lingers in every movement, every breath. Yet the commissars demand they return to the line, lasgun in hand, as though nothing has changed. The Imperium's medicine is not designed to restore. It is designed to wring out every last ounce of usefulness, no matter how much agony it inflicts. The crude stimulants the medics inject are a perfect example. They surge through the bloodstream like fire, burning away pain, flooding the body with adrenaline until it shakes with unnatural energy. For a time, the soldier feels unstoppable, his wounds forgotten, his muscles surging with borrowed strength. But the high is fleeting, and when it fades, the body collapses. Organs rupture, blood vessels burst, the heart strains against the unnatural rhythm, and yet the soldier is kept alive with another injection, and another, until he burns himself out entirely. By then, the medics have already moved on, leaving the husk of a man to either stumble forward or fall into the mud, forgotten. Augmetics are no better. A soldier who loses a limb may hope that a replacement will save him. But the reality is crueler. The mechanicus does not waste time with seamless grafts or advanced bionics on ordinary guardsmen. Instead, crude mass-produced limbs are hammered into place. A jagged steel claw where a hand once was, a piston-driven leg that grinds with every step, a lens bolted into the skull that glows faintly in the dark. These replacements are not gifts. They are punishments, reminders that the soldier's flesh was too weak and that now he must live in pain to serve longer. Every movement grates, every nerve screams, and yet the soldier fights on, his body a constant battlefield of its own. Some treatments blur the line between life and torture entirely. Field amputations are carried out with saws that bite through bone. Cauterizations burn flesh black, and crude grafts leave wounds festering with infection. Soldiers survive these ordeals, but the cost is unbearable. They return to the lines weaker, slower, broken in body and spirit. And yet, they are pushed forward, used until they collapse. Their suffering is not an accident. It is the Imperium's design. In the eyes of the High Lords and the Commissars, pain is proof of devotion. To endure agony without complaint is considered a holy act, a sacrifice to the Emperor himself. The wounded are not victims, but offerings, their misery sanctified by faith. It is said that some medics come to relish this philosophy. They chant prayers as they cut, whisper litanies as they inject stimulants, and smile beneath their masks as soldiers scream. They believe suffering purifies, that pain is the Emperor's test, and that those who survive it are reborn as stronger servants. To such medics, the battlefield is not a place of horror but of ritual. They do not see themselves as butchers, but as priests of agony, offering flesh and blood to the Imperium's endless hunger. For the soldiers trapped under their knives, there is no comfort in this faith, only terror. The punishment does not end with treatment. Soldiers who survive their wounds often return to the front lines only to find themselves shunned by their comrades. Crude augmetics and festering wounds mark them as half-men, reminders of what awaits anyone who falls. The healthy look away, whispering prayers that they will never share the same fate. The wounded are isolated, their suffering ignored, their bodies consumed by the war machine. They are not men anymore, but warnings, living examples of what the Imperium demands of those who cannot die quickly enough. And for those who can no longer serve, the punishment takes its final form. The medics hand them over to the mechanicus, who strip away what remains of their identity and fuse their bodies into machines. These soldiers do not find peace in death. They are remade into servitors, lobotomized, their humanity erased, their bodies bound to endless labor. To have been wounded is not to be finished, but to be recycled, condemned to a second life of silence and toil. The soldier who once prayed for healing now prays for an end that will never come. In the Imperium, healing is not a reprieve. It is a chain. Every act of treatment is designed to prolong suffering, to force the wounded to give more of themselves than they ever thought possible. A soldier who is saved is not fortunate. He is cursed. For the war does not end, the pain does not stop, and the Emperor does not grant mercy. The medics ensure that even in survival, there is only punishment. This is the truth the soldiers whisper when the guns fall silent and the night grows long. They do not pray to be healed. They do not pray to return home whole. They pray for a clean death on the battlefield, a death that will deny the medics their work. Better to fall quickly than to live broken, chained by pain, forced to serve until nothing remains. In the Imperium of man, healing is not salvation. It is another form of cruelty, another reminder that in the 41st millennium, even survival is a punishment. There is a cruelty deeper than wounds, deeper than the saws and stimulants of the medics. It is the fate of those who do not die, yet are not permitted to live. In the Imperium, the line between man and machine is not a boundary, but a resource, and the wounded are harvested for parts, reshaped into something less than human, but more enduring than flesh. This is the destiny of many victims of the battlefield, to become servitors, the silent, mindless workers that haunt every corner of the galaxy. The medics are not merely healers or executioners. They are the first step in a process of unmaking, stripping a man of his humanity and preparing him for a second life of eternal service. When a soldier falls on the battlefield and his wounds are judged too severe for return, he is not always granted death. Some are carried to the rear lines, not to rest, but to be delivered into the hands of the mechanicus. There, the surgical servitors await, their blades gleaming in the dim light, their bodies bristling with grafted instruments. These are not doctors in the old sense. They are machines of transformation, their purpose not to save, but to remake. The soldier, still alive, still screaming, is placed upon a slab of cold metal. His fate is sealed the moment the clamps close over his limbs. The process is not quick. First, the flesh is cut, stripped, and measured. Broken bones are removed, ruined organs discarded, until only what is deemed useful remains. Then the machines move in with augmetics. Rusted limbs bolted into sockets, steel spines welded to fragile vertebrae, optics grafted into bloodied sockets. The soldier is reshaped piece by piece, his body reforged into something functional. But the cruelest part is not the mutilation of the body. It is the mutilation of the mind. The Imperium cannot tolerate doubt, cannot permit fear, cannot allow a servant who remembers who he was. And so the brain is erased, lobotomized with machines that burn away identity, wipe clean memory, and leave only a shell of obedience. The man who once laughed, who once prayed, who once dreamed of home, is silenced forever. In his place stands a servitor, empty-eyed and voiceless, bound by circuits and code to labor without thought. It is not death and it is not life. It is something worse, a prison without end. The battlefield medics know this fate well, for they are often the ones who decide which soldiers are sent to the Mechanicus. They look at a ruined body and mark it not as a loss but as material. They inject stimulants to keep the heart beating, stitch wounds just enough to preserve the corpse, and send it forward for reclamation. To the medics, it is efficiency. To the soldiers, it is a horror greater than death. Many pray that if they fall, their comrades will end their lives before the medics arrive, sparing them the silence of servitorhood. The servitors of surgery are not limited to the wounded. Criminals, heretics, and even medics themselves sometimes meet the same fate. A medic who falters, who shows hesitation, who questions his orders, may find himself strapped to the same slab he once presided over. His hands, once trembling with compassion, are replaced with drills. His eyes, once wet with tears, are replaced with lenses. His voice, once capable of protest, is silenced forever. In this way, the Imperium ensures that doubt is consumed and recycled like any other weakness. On the battlefield, servitors return as eerie reminders of this process. Gun servitors with bolters grafted into their arms march beside guardsmen. Heavy servitors drag artillery shells across the mud, their blank faces illuminated by explosions. Surgical servitors stalk the trenches, syringes and saws dripping with blood, working without pause on the broken bodies of the fallen. The soldiers fight beside them, but never look them in the eye. For in those empty sockets they see what they themselves might become. The transformation into servitorhood is not spoken of openly. The ecclesiarchy declares it holy, a purification of the soul, a final offering to the emperor. They claim that the lobotomy frees the spirit from sin, allowing it to serve without hesitation. But even the most faithful guardsmen whisper in the dark that it is a curse, not a blessing. They wonder if the erased mind still lingers, screaming in silence inside a machine that no longer listens. The fear of this fate haunts them more than death itself, for death is unending, but servitorhood is eternal. To the Imperium, this system is practical. Every life must serve, and if the flesh is too broken for war, then let it serve in labor. If the mind is too rebellious for obedience, then strip it away and replace it with silence. Nothing is wasted, nothing is spared. The war machine grinds on, fueled not only by blood, but by the hollow shells of those who could not keep up. And so the medics, with their saws and syringes, are not healers but harvesters, selecting which flesh will fight and which flesh will labor. There are stories, hushed, dangerous stories, of soldiers who saw recognition flicker in a servitor's eyes, of one who turned its head at the sound of its old name, of another who wept silently as it carried ammunition to the front. Whether these tales are true or not does not matter. What matters is that the soldiers believe them, and that belief gnaws at their souls. They look at the servitors beside them and wonder if their comrades still linger inside, trapped forever, begging for release. This is the true punishment of survival in the Imperium. Death on the battlefield is not the worst fate a soldier can face. Worse is to be saved, stitched together, and handed to the Mechanicus. Worse is to wake on a slab, surrounded by surgical servitors, and feel the cold bite of steel as your body is dismantled piece by piece. Worse is to lose not only your life, but yourself, until nothing remains but silence and obedience. In the Imperium, there is no end to service. The wounded who cannot fight are not allowed peace. They are recycled, remade, and returned as shadows of themselves. The medics know this. The soldiers fear it, and the war machine of humanity feeds upon it, uncaring, relentless, eternal. For in the 41st millennium, even the broken must serve. The fate of the wounded in the Imperium is not determined by chance, nor by mercy, but by the cold arithmetic of survival. In the 41st millennium, a soldier's life is measured not in years, but in moments of usefulness. When wounds take away that usefulness, the Imperium does not ask what can be done for the man. It asks what can be extracted from him before he is discarded. The medics are the arbiters of this process, their blood-stained hands deciding who is sent back to the line, who is executed in the mud, and who is carried away for a fate that is far worse than either. For some, the fate is immediate and final. A wound that renders a soldier immobile, a lung punctured beyond repair, a spine shattered by shrapnel. These are judged not as tragedies, but as inefficiencies. The medic leans over the gasping soldier, examines him with cold detachment, and shakes his head. A whispered prayer, a shot through the temple, and the Imperium saves a ration, a bullet, and a burden. Death comes not as an accident, but as a calculated decision, another act of triage where mercy has no part. To the soldier it is betrayal. To the Imperium, it is necessity. Others find themselves bound to the cruelest kind of survival. Those who can still stand, even if broken, are patched together with crude bandages and stimulants, their pain ignored, their wounds left to fester. They are pushed back into the fire, their bodies trembling, their blood soaking their uniforms, their eyes glazed with shock. They are not men anymore, but fuel burned until there is nothing left. Some survive this punishment for days, even weeks, stumbling through battles with half their flesh rotting beneath filthy dressings. They die not in a moment of glory, but in slow degradation, used until their bodies collapse completely. For these, the fate is not peace, but suffering stretched across every heartbeat. There are those whose fate is even darker, for they are not allowed death nor the shallow dignity of the wounded. These are taken to the rear lines, delivered into the hands of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Their wounds are not treated to restore them, but to preserve them just enough for transformation. They become servitors, their flesh grafted with steel, their minds stripped bare, their humanity erased. What began as a plea for help on the battlefield ends as eternal silence in a labor camp or manufactorum. Soldiers speak of this fate in whispers, swearing they would rather die 1,000 deaths than live in such a state. Yet many find themselves strapped to the tables, screaming as the Mechanicus cuts away who they once were. Even those who escape this harvest are rarely blessed. Some are shipped back to hive cities or imperial worlds, but what awaits them there is no reprieve. The wounded are not honored, not celebrated. They return maimed, scarred, and broken, their bodies twisted by crude augmetics, their spirits hollowed by trauma. They are cast aside into the lower levels of the hive, forgotten by the very empire they bled for. Some take to begging, others to crime, but most simply vanish into the masses, their suffering unnoticed in a society already drowning in misery. The Imperium does not reward its wounded. It discards them like used tools. Among the Astra Militarum, there is an unspoken truth that all soldiers know. To be wounded is to be condemned. A clean death in battle is the only mercy a guardsman can hope for. The commissars encourage this belief, for it drives men forward in suicidal charges, their fear of lingering agony greater than their fear of the enemy. Better to die beneath the guns of the foe than to be left behind for the medics. Better to vanish in fire than to rot in the hands of the Mechanicus. The fate of the wounded is not uncertain. It is a nightmare in every form. There are rare exceptions. Heroes of proven worth, officers with influence, or soldiers whose deeds have been noticed by the right eyes may be granted better care. They may receive augmetics of higher quality, treatments with greater precision, perhaps even the luxury of true rest. But these are rarities, exceptions that prove the rule. For every one soldier saved in such a way, thousands more are butchered, patched, or erased. The Imperium reserves mercy for the few, cruelty for the many. What makes this fate most terrifying is the silence that surrounds it. Soldiers know the truth, but they do not speak it openly. Civilians whisper rumors, but never question the official sermons. The ecclesiarchy dresses the horror in words of faith, calling it sacrifice, duty, and glory. They preach that the wounded who become servitors are closer to the emperor than any man, for they serve without question or hesitation. But behind closed doors, the whispers persist, that the wounded are slaves, that their pain is eternal. that their fate is worse than damnation. These whispers never reach the surface, for those who speak too loudly vanish, and sometimes return with blank eyes and metal grafts, their warnings carved into their very flesh. The fate of the wounded is the Imperium itself in miniature. It reveals everything about humanity's empire, its cruelty, its indifference, its hunger for survival at any cost. A man can give his blood, his limbs, his sanity, and still be deemed not enough. He can scream for help and be silenced with a bolt pistol. He can beg for mercy and find himself remade into a machine that will never stop laboring. There is no kindness, no reprieve, no rest. Only the endless cycle of use and discard, of suffering and silence. For the wounded, hope is the rarest commodity. To die quickly is to be spared. To be saved is to be punished. To be taken is to be erased. In the grim darkness of the far future, a soldier's fate does not end when he falls to the ground. It begins anew in pain, in silence, in eternal service. The wounded do not find peace. They are bound forever to the machinery of war, another cog in the Imperium's endless grinding hunger. And this, above all, is why soldiers whisper before battle, not for survival, but for death. They pray not for healing, but for an end. For in the Imperium of man, to be wounded is not to be spared, it is to be condemned. Among the many horrors of the Imperium's wars, there exists a class of medic unlike any found in the Guard. They are not frail men in blood-stained coats, nor servitors with rusted saws. They are giants, clad in ceramite, their every step thunderous, their every word a command. They are the apothecaries of the Adeptus Astartes, warrior healers who stride into battle with bolter and narthecium alike. To the ordinary soldier, they are gods of flesh and steel, saviors in white and blue. But the truth, as always in the 41st millennium, is far darker. An apothecary does not heal for mercy, nor save for compassion. His duty is sacred, yes, but sacred in a way that terrifies even the Space Marines themselves. For his true purpose is not to preserve the man, but the chapter. Not to save the warrior, but the gene seed. Astartes are more than soldiers. They are living relics of the Emperor, their bodies built around the most precious resource in the galaxy, their gene seed. This genetic legacy, implanted in every Space Marine, ensures the survival of their chapter. Without it, they cannot replenish their numbers, cannot continue their eternal vigil. To lose a battle brother's gene seed is to lose part of the chapter itself, an irreplaceable fragment of their lineage. The apothecary carries the burden of preserving it, no matter the cost. And so when an Astartes falls, bleeding out upon the battlefield, the apothecary's first thought is not of saving his life, but of saving his gene seed. The narthecium, that symbol of the apothecary's office, is a tool that embodies this grim duty. It contains syringes, bone saws, drills, and sacred containers. In moments, it can patch wounds, stitch arteries, and flood the body with stims. But more often, it is used to cut into the chest, to carve through bone and muscle, to extract the progenoid glands that hold the chapter's future. The fallen warrior may still breathe, still whisper prayers, still look upon his brother with hope, but the apothecary kneels over him, chanting solemn litanies, and drives the narthecium into his chest. His life ends with a shudder, and the gene seed is preserved. In this act there is no mercy, only necessity. The chapter endures, even if the man does not. For the Astartes themselves, this truth is accepted, even embraced. They are raised from their earliest days to understand that their lives are not their own. They are weapons of the Emperor, vessels of his will, and their bodies belong to their chapter. To fall in battle is not failure, so long as their gene seed is recovered. Yet beneath this stoicism lies a terror unspoken. Every Space Marine knows that should he fall, he may not die in glory. Instead, he may feel the cold touch of the narthecium digging into his flesh while his heart still beats. His last moments reduced not to triumph, but to harvesting. It is a noble duty, yes, but one steeped in a cruelty as vast as the galaxy itself. The apothecaries themselves bear the weight of this burden. They are warriors, brothers, and surgeons, but above all, they are custodians of their chapter's soul. To them, every battle is a balance between saving the living and preserving the dead. Sometimes they succeed in dragging a wounded brother back to the apothecarian, his wounds bound with sacred ointments and bionics. Sometimes they must make the harder choice, silencing a brother's pleas for help and cutting deep into his chest, murmuring hymns to cover the sound of his screams. The apothecaries do not flinch, for hesitation would mean the loss of the gene seed. But they do not forget either. Many carry the faces of those they harvested in their dreams. their memories as heavy as the armor they wear. The warriors of the guard, who sometimes glimpse these giants at work, whisper about them with awe and fear. They see apothecaries as saviors, blessed figures who can mend even the deadliest wounds. They do not understand the true purpose behind the Narthesium. They cannot comprehend that what looks like healing is often dissection, that what looks like salvation is often sacrifice. To the guardsmen, the apothecaries are symbols of hope. To the space marines, they are reminders of mortality. In the darker corners of the Imperium, there are stories of apothecaries who went too far, of those who became so consumed with preserving gene seed that they harvested it from brothers who might yet have lived, of those who, in their zeal, took more than was necessary, leaving a trail of silent corpses in their wake. Such tales are whispered carefully, for to accuse an apothecary of failing his duty is blasphemy. But the fear persists even among the Astartes, that their healers may one day become butchers, valuing only the chapter's survival and discarding the brotherhood they swore to protect. The apothecaries are not villains, nor are they saints. They are the embodiment of the Imperium's philosophy, even among its mightiest warriors. In the galaxy of endless war, the individual does not matter. Only the survival of the whole carries weight, and so the apothecary kneels in the blood and mud, not to save the man who lies dying, but to save the chapter he represents. The brother is mourned, but the gene seed is preserved. The man is lost, but the war continues. This is the grim reality of the apothecaries of the Adeptus Astartes. They stride into battle as healers, but their true calling is far darker. Their hands carry life, but also death. Their Narthesia gleam with tools of salvation, but also with saws of sacrifice. They are the keepers of legacy, the guardians of tomorrow, but also the harvesters of today. And in their shadow, even the angels of death learn that they are not immortal. They are vessels, and when the vessel breaks, the apothecary comes to claim what remains. In the end, the duty of the apothecary is not about healing, not about saving, not even about brotherhood. It is about ensuring that the chapter endures, no matter how many of its sons must fall. It is a noble duty. It is a holy duty. And it is a duty steeped in blood, silence, and endless sacrifice. The Imperium's medicine is cruel, but it is not unique. Across the galaxy, every race wages war in its own way, and every race has its own answer to the problem of the wounded. Some methods are more efficient, some are more alien, and some are more horrifying than even the Imperium's brutal practices. To compare them is to peer into the abyss of the 41st millennium and realize that in this galaxy, there are no healers, no saints, no mercy, only different flavors of horror. Among the orcs, the wounded are not treated as burdens or even as victims. For the greenskins, injury is simply another chance to prove strength. An orc with a severed arm may laugh, grab the limb, and try to smash it back into place with crude nails and spit. Their so-called medics, the pain boys, are little more than sadistic tinkerers, driven by instinct and insanity. They stitch flesh together with iron wire, graft weapons directly into wounds, and jam syringes of unknown fluid into their patients without hesitation. The result is rarely clean, rarely stable, and often fatal, but in orc logic, it works. For those who survive, the scars and grafts are badges of honor, proof that they are tougher than the rest. And for those who die, it matters little. There are always more orcs, always another Wa to fuel. In their madness, the pain boys embody the orc philosophy. Pain is not punishment, but entertainment. The Tyranids approach the wounded in a way entirely alien, a perspective beyond human comprehension. To the hive mind, there is no such thing as a wounded organism. There is only biomass, useful or spent. Tyranid creatures that fall in battle are not retrieved for healing, but for recycling. The smaller organisms swarm over the dying, dissolving their flesh, breaking them down into nutrients to be carried back to the spawning pools. What is destroyed is remade, reconstituted into new horrors. A broken limb does not mean treatment, it means consumption. In the Tyranid view, the individual is irrelevant, the hive eternal. Even the concept of medicine has no place among them, for they do not heal, they only transform. For the enemies of the Tyranids, this truth is worse than death. For every soldier who falls may one day rise again, reshaped into the very monsters that consumed him, the Eldar. For all their ancient wisdom reveal a cruelty of their own. Their medics wield technologies so advanced they appear as sorcery, stitching torn flesh with beams of light, repairing shattered bones with crystalline grafts, restoring life in moments. To an outsider, it might seem miraculous, a level of care that could put the Imperium to shame. But the truth is more sinister. The Eldar heal not out of mercy but out of desperation. Their species teeters on the edge of extinction, their numbers dwindling with every passing century. Every life is precious, not for its own sake, but for the survival of their kind. Their healing is not kindness, it is selfishness, born from the terror of annihilation. And even then, they reserve it only for their own. To the humans they fight beside or against, there is no mercy, no aid. The Eldar may heal their wounded brothers, but they will step over a dying human without pause, their gaze cold and unfeeling. The Dark Eldar take this cruelty further, twisting medicine into a form of sadism that rivals the worst nightmares of the Imperium. In the dark city of Kamarag, homunculi practice arts that are both medicine and torture. They can restore life to the dead, rebuild bodies from scraps of flesh, and prolong existence indefinitely. But these acts are never done for kindness. They are inflicted upon their victims who are remade again and again, their suffering prolonged for centuries. The homunculi delight in reshaping flesh, creating monstrosities of muscle and bone, dragging screams from their captives until the victims beg for death that will never come. To the Dark Eldar, medicine is not a tool of healing. It is a weapon of despair, a way to ensure their victims can be broken endlessly without release. Even chaos has its healers, though the word scarcely fits. The followers of Nurgle spread disease as both curse and blessing, their wounds festering but never truly fatal. They rot and decay, yet continue to fight, sustained by the plague god's obscene gifts. Their healing is not restoration but corruption. Wounds become mouths, infections become blessings, and what should kill instead grants resilience beyond imagination. To fight a servant of Nurgle is to face a creature that does not die, because death itself flees from the corruption that sustains it. The wounded among them do not seek healing. They rejoice in their sickness, praising the decay that keeps them alive. For the enemies of Nurgle there is no hope, for even to wound them is to feed their god. Khorne's followers, by contrast, reject healing entirely. To them, wounds are proof of devotion, blood spilled as offerings to their god. Those who survive fight on, those who fall are forgotten. There are no medics, no surgeons, no reprieve. The battlefield itself is their altar, and pain is the only sacrament. Slaanesh and Tzeentch, too, twist medicine to their own ends, reshaping bodies in grotesque or unnatural ways, ensuring that even survival becomes a curse. To compare these horrors is to understand that the galaxy offers no comfort. The Imperium punishes its wounded with crude surgeries and servitorhood. The orcs laugh and nail their flesh back together. The Tyranids consume their own without hesitation. The Eldar heal only themselves, while the Dark Eldar ensure their victims never escape suffering. Chaos corrupts, twists, and prolongs pain until it becomes worship. Across the stars, every race proves the same truth. There is no mercy, no healing, only endurance, mutation, and silence. And for humanity, caught between these predators, the lesson is clear. To be wounded is to suffer, no matter who you serve, no matter where you fall. The galaxy does not heal, it consumes. The galaxy does not preserve, it punishes. The wounded are not saved. They are remade, recycled, or erased. The dream of healing belongs to a past long forgotten. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and in that war, even survival is horror. War in the 41st millennium is not a campaign with beginnings or endings. It is an endless cycle, a tide of blood that never recedes, only grows. To be born into the Imperium is to be born into this cycle, and for the wounded, there is no escape. Their pain, their service, their silence, all of it feeds the machine of war, which grinds on without pause or mercy. Every battle is only another link in a chain that stretches back 10,000 years and forward into eternity. The medics who stalk the trenches are only caretakers of this chain, ensuring it is never broken, ensuring that even the broken bodies of humanity are kept moving forward. No matter how much they suffer, a soldier who is patched together and thrown back into the line does not return as he was. He is weaker, slower, more scarred, but the Imperium does not care. He can still fire a laser gun, still march beneath the Aquila, still bleed for the Emperor. And so he is used until his body collapses again, and when it does, the cycle repeats. Another round of stimulants, another amputation, another crude augmetic grafted into his flesh. Again he is shoved forward, again he breaks, again he is remade. There is no end until nothing remains but scraps fit only for the mechanicus to recycle. For many soldiers, Their entire lives become this cycle of wound and return, each time losing more of themselves, each time edging closer to silence. The cycle is not limited to individuals. Entire regiments are consumed in this way. Tens of thousands raised from their homeworlds, hurled into the fire, cut down in droves, and yet sustained just enough to keep fighting. The medics move through them like shepherds of the dying, keeping the herd alive not for its own sake, but to keep feeding the slaughter. When too many fall, replacements are shipped in, and the cycle begins again. The regiments themselves are recycled just as much as the men within them. Their banners burn, their names fade, but their blood fuels the same wars fought 1,000 times before. Even the apothecaries of the Astartes are trapped in this endless rhythm. For every gene seed harvested, another warrior is raised, another brother is sent into the same battles, to die in the same mud, to be harvested once more. The Astartes, who imagine themselves eternal, are bound to the same truth as the mortal guardsmen. They are parts in a machine that does not stop. Their victories do not end wars, their sacrifices do not end suffering. Each victory bleeds into another war. Each sacrifice demands another life. The apothecary preserves the chapter, but what he preserves it for is only more slaughter. The cycle is sanctified by the Imperium itself. The ecclesiarchy dresses it in faith, calling it holy endurance, the emperor's divine will. They preach that suffering is not meaningless, but sacred, that every drop of blood spilled feeds the light of humanity. And the people believe, because they must. To deny it would be to face the truth, that their lives are consumed endlessly, without pause, without hope of reprieve. Faith becomes the salve that dulls the knife, even as the knife cuts deeper with every generation, but the soldiers know better. In the quiet moments, when the guns are silent and the stars glare down upon the battlefield, they whisper the truth to each other. They know that they are not fighting to win, not fighting to end the war, but simply to keep it going. They know that their wounds are not healed for their sake, but so that they can be thrown back into the fire. They know that when they fall for the last time, their bodies will be stripped for parts, their names forgotten, their lives erased. And still, they march, because there is no other choice. The medics themselves are the keepers of this cycle. They do not break it, nor resist it, they enforce it. Every soldier they drag back from the brink, every crude augmetic they bolt in place, every injection of stim, they all serve the same purpose, to keep the cycle turning. The medics do not ask whether the cycle should continue. They do not wonder if the suffering is worth it. They obey because they must, because hesitation is heresy, and heresy is death. Their role is not to save, but to perpetuate, to keep the blood flowing, to keep the Imperium's war machine grinding on. Even when soldiers are discarded, their blood still feeds the cycle. Their bodies are buried in shallow graves or left to rot in no man's land, their flesh consumed by scavengers. Their bones sink into the mud, joining the countless dead beneath them. And when the next battle comes, it is fought on the same ground, over the same trenches, watered by the same blood. The living fight atop the corpses of the dead, their cries echoing those of the ones who came before. In this way, the dead never leave the war. They become part of it forever. This is the endless truth of the Imperium. There are no endings, no conclusions, no final victories. There is only the cycle of blood and duty, of wounds and punishment, of silence and oblivion. A soldier who dreams of going home, of escaping the war, clings to an illusion. The Imperium does not release its servants. It does not retire them, does not reward them, does not honor them in truth. It consumes them again and again until they are nothing, and then it consumes their children, and their children's children, until the galaxy itself runs red. The cycle is eternal because the Imperium itself is eternal, and the Imperium is eternal because it feeds on the endless suffering of its people. This is why the wounded are never spared, why the medics never stop, why the wars never end. The Imperium cannot exist without the cycle, and so it ensures it continues forever, without hope of reprieve. For the wounded, the knowledge of this truth is the deepest wound of all. It is the scar no augmetic can hide, the pain no stim can dull, the silence no prayer can fill. They know in their hearts that they will never escape, that their suffering will only feed another war, another regiment, another cycle, and when they die, their blood will soak into the ground, to be walked upon by those who follow. In the 41st millennium, there is no end, no peace, only the endless cycle of blood and duty. There is no peace in the Imperium of man. Not in life, not in death, not even in the silence of wounds. For the soldier who bleeds beneath the banners of the Emperor, mercy is a lie, rest a myth, and healing a punishment that only drags him back into the fire. This is the reality that every guardsman knows in his heart, even if he never dares to speak it. In the 41st millennium, there is no mercy. There is no rest. There is only war. And in that war, the wounded are condemned to suffer until they are ground into silence. When a man is struck down on the battlefield, his first prayer is not for aid, but for release. He hopes his comrades will grant him the clean death the Imperium will not. He hopes the medic will pass him by, or that the next shell will finish what the last one began. To be saved is to be chained, bound again to a war that never ends, his body broken but forced to stand, his soul hollowed but forced to obey. And when he collapses once more, the cycle repeats. There is no final moment, no conclusion, no mercy in survival. Only more pain. The medics know this truth better than anyone. They carry the weight of it in their hands, their robes, their tools. Every time they patch a soldier back together, they are not granting life. They are prolonging death. Every injection of stim, every crude augmetic, every bandaged wound is not a reprieve, but a sentence. They are not healers, they are jailers of the flesh, ensuring that no man escapes his duty until the Imperium has wrung from him every drop of blood, every scream, every ounce of service. They tell themselves they are serving the Emperor, that their work is holy, that suffering is sacred. But in the quiet hours, when the guns fall silent, even they must know that what they bring is not salvation, but cruelty without end. For the wounded, even death does not bring release. Some are executed where they lie, a bolt through the skull to spare resources. Others are carted to the Mechanicus, lobotomized and remade as servitors, stripped of all that once made them human. And even the dead are not spared in dignity. Their bodies are burned for fuel, their bones left to rot in the mud, their names forgotten in the tide of unending war. No graves, no remembrance, no rest. Only silence, swallowed by the roar of the next battle. The soldiers know this, and yet they march. Not because they believe in mercy, not because they believe in peace, but because they have no choice. The commissar's pistol ensures obedience, the preacher's sermons ensure submission, and the fear of worse fates ensures silence. They march not toward victory, but toward oblivion. And when they fall, the medics will come, deciding not whether they will live, but how they will be used, patched together, executed, or recycled into a machine. The soldier is not a man. He is a resource, and the Imperium never wastes its resources. The great irony is that the Imperium speaks of sacrifice, of glory, of honor in death. It tells its people that their suffering has meaning, that their blood fuels the light of humanity. But the truth, whispered only in the dark, is that there is no meaning beyond survival. The Imperium does not ask for sacrifice. It demands it, endlessly, without purpose beyond its own existence. The soldier dies not for victory, but for the machine of war to grind on another day. His wounds are not healed for his sake, but for the sake of the war. His suffering is not honored, but forgotten. And when he is gone, another will take his place, and another after him, until all that remains is silence. This is why the galaxy is called grimdark. Not because the wars are endless, though they are. Not because the enemies are monstrous, though they are. But because even survival is suffering, even healing is punishment, even death is denied its final mercy. In this universe, there are no heroes, no saints, no reprieves. There are only bodies in the mud, medics with blood-stained hands, and a war machine that will never stop until the galaxy itself is ash. And so, when the medics walk among the wounded, they carry not hope, but dread. Every soldier knows their touch means only more pain, more duty, more silence. The wounded do not call out for them. They pray to the Emperor for a quick end before they arrive. For in the Imperium, the greatest cruelty is not to die, but to be kept alive just long enough to suffer again. This is the fate of the wounded. This is the work of the medics. This is the truth of the Imperium. No mercy, no rest, only war forever.